So no matter which way you moved, you were under machine gun fire. So then we, one at a time, we made a dash across through the fire, and the entrance to the barn was in the rear. And there were two guys on a light machine gun at the rear entrance to the barn. But when the four of us got inside, it was a small barn, so that meant that all the openings were already covered. So I remember, I don't know how or why, but I got hungry, and I had a can of cheese, and I opened that can of cheese and I started to eat, and the guy yelled from the hayloft. He yelled down to us, "There's a German tank coming behind us," and then loaded with infantry. He said, "Then there's another one coming," and he kept counting. And I said, when he got up to about 7 tanks, my appetite left. And he kept on counting till he counted 13 German tanks passing us. And the two guys on the machine gun, foolishly, they opened fire on a column of tanks. And one of the tanks simply swung its turret over in their direction in one round, and they were both dead. But then when we were all in the barn, when the tank column had just about passed us, the young lieutenant said, "All right, you men, what do you want to do? Do you want to stick it out here, or do you want to try to get back?" Well, by that time, the Malmedy massacre news had gone through like a flash fire through the ranks, that the Germans were killing prisoners. So we decided we're not going to chance it, because we wouldn't have had a chance here, because then the rest of the Panzer Grenadiers would come sweeping through here, and we wouldn't have a chance. So we decided to try to get back. So that meant, one at a time then, we had to run through some cattle fences. Of course, there was an embankment there at that time. We had to make our way up the embankment, but we knew once we were on the other side, there was shelter. So one at a time, we made the dash, and evidently the Germans must have thought we were small prey. So there wasn't a shot fired at us. But when we got up here, we were absolutely dismayed to see the American equipment that was just scattered all along the roadway, all the way up. Evidently, the men from the 75th had abandoned their positions. And, but anyway, when we finally got up to the top, where the rest of the guys were, it made us very angry when we saw that they were there all night, you know. I remember I crawled on top of our half-track hood and just stretched out. I was that exhausted. And then while I was there, here a Jeep pulls up with a chubby little colonel in it, and he was irate. He said, "What are you men doing up here? You're supposed to be down in the village." You know, and we thought, well, we were down in the village, you know, we were down in the village. He said, "We're gonna," and they did, "we're gonna put white phosphorus. We're going to shell with white phosphorus and smoke. We're going to smoke the village. And then you guys are going in." Well, in the interim, a company of 16 Sherman tanks joined us. So, but meanwhile, with that German column, there was evidently, possibly a bazooka man from the 75th who hit the lead tank that was in a defilade and immobilized it, and the terrain around it was so bad that the tank column couldn't leave the road. So they were trapped. So then again, we brought out the artillery, probably 105s, 155s, 240s, everything they had, they brought out, started pounding that column, and then they brought out a flight of P-38s to bomb and strafe the column. And finally the column had to pull back. And then we came in, I'll never forget, we were, George and I, with a bazooka. When we got in, there was a house that we got into, and there was a machine gun on this side of the road somewhere, and we fired a bazooka blast into what we thought was the room where that machine gun may have been. But things, we barely got settled when those 13 tanks must have lined up, and they shelled the dickens out of this village. They just poured fire into this village. But we finally consolidated, and as I said, I remember George and I, in the process of taking it, we went down that side street, and there we met Major McGeorge. What a man, an incredible man. All he had was a map case and a .45, and he's walking, he's with the infantry, you know. And my great regret is that I never got in touch with Major McGeorge to commend him for the great leader he was. I was nearby, outside of Hebronville, when his Jeep hit a mine, and he was pretty severely wounded. But, and then finally, we spent the night here, and then during the night, pulling guard, we were being fired at. We assumed it might be from the steeple of the church. So as soon as we could, George and I circled around in front of the church,